King Charles did it again after torching Donald Trump before a joint session of Congress earlier in the day. King Charles roasted Donald Trump during a state dinner at the White House. King Charles called Donald Trump out for disturbing and destroying the international order as it relates to trade. King Charles called out Donald Trump for his attacks on NATO. And then King Charles proceeded to mock Donald Trump's ballroom, but he did it in a King Charles way that tried to inject humor into it, make the entire audience laugh. And I don't think Donald Trump fully realized that everybody was laughing at him, although he seems deeply jealous of the king in a way that he wishes that he were King Charles. And I think King Charles realizes that. So let me show you what went down. Here is what King Charles had to say during this state dinner at the White House on Ukraine and NATO. Here, play this clip.
At a most critical time in the darkest days of the 20th century, American leadership helped rebuild a shattered continent, playing a decisive role as a defender of freedom in Europe. We and I shall never forget that, not least as freedom is again under attack following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Today, our partnerships in NATO and AUKUS deepen our technological and military cooperation and ensure that together we can meet the challenges of an increasingly complex and contested world.
Hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. Donald Trump is panicking as the state visit from King Charles is over and Trump's efforts to distract from his catastrophic war in Iran have utterly failed. The American people are absolutely livid now. Donald Trump is blowing up at his own generals as he tasked his generals and intelligence officials to come up with a plan, I kid you not, for Donald Trump just to declare once and for all a unilateral victory, remove all of our aircraft carriers away from the Middle East and pretend like nothing had happened, and then just see if the world can kind of sort itself out. Would that work? How would Iran respond? To which Donald Trump's generals and intelligence officials said, "That's not going to work out, Donald. You know, you have to make a decision here. Do you want to escalate and send ground troops in and actually go back to a hot war? Or do you want to negotiate with Iran, Donald? And that means you have to make concessions. What is your choice? But just pretending that you won the war is not a solution here." And then Donald Trump is like, you know what I want to do? Let's just keep the naval blockade. And that's what we'll do. I won't say, unilateral victory. Just keep the blockade by the Persian Gulf and we will exert more pressure that way. And then our generals are like, that's not going to work. And Donald Trump's like, that is going to work. We're just going to leave the naval blockade. How long are you going to do that for, Donald? Forever. It's not even going to matter until Iran blows up, right? And then Donald Trump went on state regime media, which calls itself Fox this weekend. And he even hinted at some of these conversations that are taking place right now where he's like, okay, Iran will blow up because the oil pipelines in Iran will be so filled with pressure, the way mechanical engineering works, it's just going to blow up the country. Well, according to what Donald Trump was saying on Sunday, all of Iran would have been blown up today, and obviously that didn't happen. So now American intelligence officials and our military generals and admirals are leaking to the press that Donald Trump's plan to keep a naval blockade in place for months potentially and do nothing and just see what happens, that's the worst plan possible. Of all of the worst plans, Trump may have picked the worst one.
Here is a fact that should stop you cold. On the night of April 28, 2026, a reigning British monarch stood inside the White House East Room, looked Donald Trump directly in the eyes, cracked jokes about burning the building down, reminded the president that without Britain, America would be speaking French, gifted him a submarine bell with a punchline attached, and then delivered a speech to Congress so powerful, so precisely aimed at everything Trump stands against, that Democrats leapt to their feet and Republican members of Congress were left squirming in their seats. And Donald Trump sat there through all of it, grinning, applauding, apparently having no idea he had just been diplomatically dismantled in front of the entire world. This is the story of the night King Charles III came to Washington and did what no American politician has been willing to do for years. He told the truth with a smile on his face, and he did it with the full weight of the British crown behind him. Welcome to USA Press. I'm so glad you're here for this one, because this story has everything: royal shade, diplomatic fireworks, late-night comedy wars, and a former FBI director being indicted over seashells on a beach. Stay with us, because every single minute of what we are about to walk you through tonight is going to leave your jaw on the floor. Let's start at the beginning. King Charles III and Queen Camilla arrived at the White House on April 28, 2026, for what was billed as a celebration of the 250th anniversary of American independence and the renewal of the so-called special relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom. Melania Trump wore a pale pink Christian Dior gown. Queen Camilla was elegant. The South Portico gleamed. Cameras clicked. Handshakes were exchanged. On the surface, it looked like the kind of warm diplomatic pageantry that world leaders perform for the cameras before retreating behind closed doors to talk about the things that actually matter. But anyone who is paying close attention, and you should always be paying close attention, knew that this was no ordinary state visit. The backdrop to this entire evening was a deeply strained relationship between the two countries. Trump had spent months publicly criticizing British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The two nations were at odds over trade rules, tariffs, and the future of NATO. Britain had been watching with growing alarm as the Trump administration pulled back from the international order that had kept the peace for 80 years. And King Charles, as we were about to find out, had absolutely no intention of pretending otherwise. Before we get to the dinner itself, we have to talk about what happened earlier that day, because it set the stage for everything. King Charles stood before a joint session of the United States Congress, the first British monarch to do so since his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, delivered her own address decades ago, and he gave a speech that was, without any exaggeration, one of the most pointed, politically charged, diplomatically courageous addresses that chamber has heard in years. He opened with a quote from the Irish poet Oscar Wilde, who was, for those who may not know, famously imprisoned for his homosexuality, and then turned immediately to the theme of diversity, declaring that it is the very fact of our vibrant, diverse, and free societies that gives nations their collective strength. That was not an accident. In the very first minute of his address, Charles had fired a direct shot across the bow of an administration that has waged a systematic war on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs across the federal government. And the members of Congress in that chamber knew it. But he was only getting started. Charles then moved to the subject of NATO, and here he was, crystal clear in a way that left no room for misinterpretation. He reminded the assembled lawmakers that the only time in history that NATO's mutual defense provision, Article 5, the agreement that an attack on one member is an attack on all, had ever been invoked, was in the aftermath of September 11, 2001. It was the entire NATO alliance, Charles reminded Congress, that came to America's defense. It was the United Kingdom that sent its sons and daughters to fight alongside American troops in Afghanistan. And then, looking directly at House Speaker Mike Johnson, who was seated behind him on the dais, the king delivered a line that made the room go absolutely still. He said, and I want you to hear this clearly, that the same unyielding resolve is needed for the defense of Ukraine and her most courageous people.
Then King Charles talked about the challenges the world faces, where there are interruptions to the international order as it relates to trade. Here, play this clip.
Across the ocean and from coast to coast, we have traded, innovated, and created together. We've stood together through the best and worst of times. However, the challenges we now face from those who wish us harm across the world, to balancing the risks and opportunities of powerful new technologies, to the threats to the very international rules that have allowed us to trade and have kept power in balance for 80 years, those challenges encourage us to reaffirm tonight the basis on which our partnership has been built.
And then King Charles talked about the destruction of the East Wing, and he kind of compares it to what the British did in 1814. And he was like, I'm sorry to say that we, the British, did something similar. Our own real estate redevelopment of the White House in 1814. He's comparing Donald Trump to them in 1814. Do y'all get it? Here, play this clip.
And if I may say so, it is a particular pleasure to be back in this wonderful building, the heart of your democracy. On this occasion, I cannot help noticing the readjustments to the East Wing, Mr. President, following your visit to Windsor Castle last year. And I'm sorry to say that we British, of course, made our own small attempt at real estate redevelopment of the White House in 1814.
So now, ironically, Axios, which has been propaganda stenographer media for Donald Trump, just literally posting whatever the hell he wants to manipulate the markets, they're now getting information from sources inside the Trump regime trying to leak Donald Trump's dangerous and catastrophic plans. U.S. officials are now telling Axios they're concerned about getting drawn in to a frozen conflict of no war and no deal. In this scenario, the U.S. keeps its forces in the region for many more months. Hormuz would stay closed and the U.S. blockade would remain. I guess kind of like the way Donald Trump handled COVID. Just pretend it's not real, like a miracle, it's all going to go away, and then let someone else in the future deal with the catastrophe. Because you see what Donald Trump does? Donald Trump figures out during the most catastrophic of moments, when people are suffering the maximum amount, that's when Donald Trump, the two-bit vile piece of trash con artist that he's been, the scumbag that he's been his entire life, he feasts on people's suffering. And that's where he blames people. Who's going to be his Dr. Fauci? Who's going to be the person that he can put it all on? Why don't the arsonist put it on the firefighter? Who's going to be his former President Biden? Who's going to be his Jerome Powell? Who's going to be his James Comey, right? This is what this guy does. And he finds people suffering and then he waits and waits. It wasn't me. And then he blames other people. Now, that leak to Axios followed the Wall Street Journal reporting that Trump's just going to stick with the blockade, which is, in effect, a decision to not make a decision at all. Trump will wait. We'll see if the blockade works. Not like the people here are suffering or anything. And then Donald Trump feels, look, Iran's facing economic pressure, so maybe they break. You think you're going to break Iran when after you engaged in the invasion with Netanyahu in Israel, they didn't break then, and Aragchi's hanging out with Putin right now, or he was hanging out with Putin this week while you were there, doing whatever the weird thing you were doing with King Charles, while you were hiding the bruises on your hand with the makeup, while you were grabbing Melania's backside on camera, while you were there just, behaving like a freaking monster and a weirdo. Putin was meeting with Foreign Minister Aragchi of Iran, coming up with strategic plans, and Iran, what they've been utilizing this time for is digging out all of the weapons that may have been buried under some rubble based on the strikes by the U.S. and Israel. Iran right now is rapidly manufacturing the Shahed FPV drones and ballistic missiles. They probably by now.
That was directed not at some foreign audience. That was directed at the Republican majority sitting in front of him, the same Republican majority that has dragged its feet on aid to Ukraine, that has echoed Russian talking points, that has watched as Vladimir Putin's forces continue to tear through a democratic nation while Washington plays political games. Charles looked them in the eye and said, "Give them the same resolve you would want for yourselves." The silence in the chamber was deafening. But the most extraordinary moment, the one that is going to be studied by political scientists and historians for decades, came when Charles drew a direct line between the Magna Carta, signed in 13th century England, and establishing that even the king is subject to the law, and the foundational principles of the American Republic. He spoke of English common law and the Bill of Rights, and then, in a sentence that triggered the loudest and most sustained applause of the entire address, he said that this tradition represents the foundation of the principle that executive power is subject to checks and balances. The chamber erupted. Democrats were on their feet instantly. Even Republicans who had been sitting stone-faced began applauding, because to refuse to applaud the concept of checks and balances in front of a live national audience was a political step even the most loyal Trump supporters were not willing to take publicly. Trump himself had reportedly told aides afterwards that he couldn't believe Democrats had applauded the speech so enthusiastically that they'd liked Charles more than they've ever liked any Republican or Democrat, actually. He meant it as a compliment. But think about what that sentence really tells you. The President of the United States watched a foreign dignitary articulate the founding principles of American democracy, watched those words produce a bipartisan standing ovation, and the lesson he took from it was that Charles was popular.
More jokes, more roasting of Donald Trump from King Charles this evening. And he said, hey, Donald, I know you're saying that we would all speak German if it wasn't for you. Guess what? You'd all be speaking French if it wasn't for us in the UK. Remember how long our relationship goes. Here, play this clip.
This said, our French friends can feel equally at home with a glance at a map. Indeed, you recently commented, Mr. President, that if it were not for the United States, European countries would be speaking German. Dare I say that if it wasn't for us, you'd be speaking French.
And then you can see how awkward and weird Donald Trump is right here. King Charles is presenting Donald Trump with this original bell from a submarine. And then Donald Trump hears, oh, am I getting a gift? Am I getting a gift? So Donald Trump stands up to take it. And King Charles is looking at him like, dude, what are you doing? Let me finish my damn speech. Here, play this clip.
So tonight, Mr. President, I am delighted to present to you as a personal gift the original bell which hung on the conning tower of your valiant namesake. May it stand as a testimony to our nation's shared history and shining future. And should you ever need to get hold of us, or just give us a ring.
And then King Charles gives this toast right here, and Donald Trump gets all touchy with him. King Charles makes a joke about the Boston Tea Party. And what King Charles is doing here is, after really laying into Donald Trump on the issue of Trump's attack on NATO, Trump's attack on Ukraine, and then Trump's attack on international trade, that's when King Charles then injects some humor into it and kind of lets Donald Trump drop his guard, and then boom, does a Boston Tea Party joke. And then you can see Donald Trump is so damn touchy with him and is weird. Here, play this clip.
Thank you, Mr. President and Mrs. Trump, for your splendid dinner this evening, which, may I say, is a very considerable improvement on the Boston Tea Party. So, whether your cup contains tea, wine, Scotch whiskey, bourbon, or even cola, let us raise our glasses and voices as we toast the past, the present, and the future, thank you, of our two proud and allied nations. To the United States and the United Kingdom, God bless both our countries.
Thank you very much. Thank you. There's your bell. Great job. That's so beautiful.
Have replenished all of the missiles that they've lost, because their entire economy right now is working to prepare for a potential further escalation of this war. And they have a firm grip on the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, Donald, remember Prime Minister Takaishi from Japan and her visit to America and your visit to Japan, where she acted all nice to you? Remember, she even helped you walk straight, because you can't walk in a freaking straight line. line anymore? Remember that when you visited Japan? Well, guess what? Japan just cut a bilateral deal with Iran that Foreign Minister Araghchi was basically bragging about by making social media posts to point out when Japan broke a British blockade in the about 60, 70 years ago or so, and how now Japan has cut a deal with Iran to be able to take Gulf oil, go through the Strait of Hormuz, and see you later, alligator. Japan's bringing their oil to Japan right now, and they're desperate for oil, but Japan cut a deal directly with Iran. And so, the Wall Street Journal reporting that Trump has instructed aides to prepare for an extended blockade of Iran, U.S. officials said, targeting the regime's coffers in a high-risk bid to compel a nuclear capitulation Tehran has long refused. In recent meetings, Trump opted to continue squeezing Iran's economy and oil exports by preventing shipping to and from its ports. He assessed that his other options, resume bombing or walk away from the conflict, carried more risk. Continuing the blockade, Alex Ward writes, also prolongs a conflict that has driven up gas prices, hurts Trump's poll numbers, and further darken Republicans' prospects in the midterm elections. Trump's decision represents a new phase of sorts of the war and highlights the fact that the president, who always seeks a quick and salable victory, is devoid of a silver bullet. White House spokesman Anna Kelly said the U.S. has met Operation Epic Fury's military objectives, and that thanks to the successful blockade of Iranian ports, the United States has maximum leverage over the regime. Oh, I see that maximum leverage every day because it seems like Iran's just tapping out. I'm being sarcastic, of course. As one commentator notes, at last, Donald Trump found a way to save face, keep the Iran conflict active, avoid real action, and call the blockade a strategy. The rest of the world suffers. Billions of lives are affected by this nonsense, but it makes Donald Trump feel good. He feels tough with the blockade, like, look, I'm doing something, and then he's going to go and blame someone. Folks, this is what Donald Trump has done his entire damn life. Do you want to know how he bankrupted like most of the things that he touched? Because he is weak and pathetic and a loser and he's dumb. But what he is able to do is he's able to brainwash people. He's one of the greatest, if not the greatest con man in the history of mankind. He's able to tap into people's reptilian brains of sorts. And he's able to say, during people's crises that he's going to fix it when he's the one who creates the catastrophe.
Not that the principals themselves deserved that response. Not that perhaps the reason the crowd reacted the way it did was because they are starved for someone, anyone, to stand up and remind them that in this country, no one is above the law. Not even the executive. If you are finding this as remarkable as we do here at USA Press, do us a favor right now and hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We do this work every single day because the stories that matter deserve to be told fully and without fear, and your support is what makes that possible. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Now, the dinner. And this is where things get genuinely, spectacularly entertaining. King Charles arrived at the East Room of the White House for the state dinner, took his seat, and then proceeded to do something the British have been perfecting for centuries. He delivered a masterclass in the art of the polite obliteration. He smiled the whole time. He was gracious, charming, warm, impeccably mannered. And then he absolutely took apart everything around him with the precision of a surgeon and the timing of a seasoned comedian. Let's walk through this piece by piece, because every single exchange deserves its own moment. The first thing you need to know is the setting. Trump has been planning to demolish the East Wing of the White House, the very wing where the dinner was being held, to build a 90,000 square foot ballroom estimated to cost $400 million. That's right, $400 million in taxpayer money to build a ballroom. The East Wing is being gutted for it. When Charles arrived and took in the state of the renovations, he did not let the moment pass. He smiled, he addressed the president directly, and he said, "I cannot help noticing the readjustments to the East Wing, Mr. President, following your visit to Windsor Castle last year." He then paused, let the room lean in, and delivered the line that the internet is still talking about. "I'm sorry to say that we British, of course, made our own small attempt at real estate redevelopment of the White House in 1814. The room erupted in laughter. What Charles was referring to, of course, was the War of 1812, when British forces marched into Washington, D.C. and set the White House on fire. He was comparing Trump's demolition of the East Wing to a British military attack on the building. And he said it with the most beatific smile you have ever seen on a man's face. Trump laughed. The crowd laughed. And somewhere in the reaction, you could sense that not everyone in that room had fully processed what had just been said to them. But Charles was not finished. Not by a long shot. Trump had made a comment, as he often does because he cannot help himself, that if not for America's intervention in World War II, European countries would be speaking German. It is the kind of historically simplified boast that plays well at rallies and very poorly in front of a man who has spent his entire life studying history. Charles heard it, filed it away, and when his moment came at the dinner, he deployed it with surgical precision. He looked at Trump, smiled that smile, and said, "You recently commented, Mr. President, that if it were not for the United States, European countries would be speaking German. Dare I say that if it wasn't for us, you'd be speaking French." Once again, the room went wild. Once again, Trump laughed. And once again, the King of England had just reminded the President of the United States that the historical debt runs in multiple directions, that America's founding came in large part from English-speaking colonists who were, at the time, British subjects, and that the mythology of American exceptionalism, while powerful, has a much longer and more complicated story behind it. The gifts portion of the evening deserves its own segment because King Charles brought receipts. Literally. He presented Donald Trump with what he described as a personal gift, the original bell from the conning tower of a Royal Navy submarine called HMS Trump. Let that sink in. There is a British submarine named Trump. It was launched in 1944, it fought in the Pacific Theater during World War II, and it carried the name Trump on its hull through some of the most consequential naval battles of the 20th century. Charles presented the bell from that vessel, inscribed Trump 1944, and noted that it stood as testimony to the nation's shared history. And then, because he is who he is, he could not resist one final twist of the knife, delivering it with a smile so warm it could melt glaciers. "And should you ever need to get hold of us," he said, holding up the bell, "just give us a ring." A submarine bell, a ring joke. At a state dinner, in the White House. This is the King of England, ladies and gentlemen, and he came to play. The crowd loved it. Trump loved it. Everyone in that room was laughing.
So then Donald Trump tries to do like his own humor, and it's not funny at all. Trump totally bombs. Trump's like, Windsor Castle, I hear it's built by William the Conqueror. He a nice guy, that William the Conqueror? And nobody laughs at all because it's weird. Here, play this clip.
Windsor Castle, a structure that's so beautiful and so long that it never seemed to end. I looked down as a former real estate person, and it just went on forever. And it was built by a gentleman named William the Conqueror in the year 1070. And I asked the king, I said, was he a nice man, William the Conqueror? He said, I tend to doubt it. I don't think so. When they call you William the Conqueror, generally speaking, you're not going to be too nice, but he must have been something because it was nothing like I've ever seen Windsor Castle. But
then Donald Trump departs from his prepared remarks to say that Iran is defeated, which it's not. Play this clip.
But it was unconquerable courage, this inexhaustible supply of ambition, ingenuity, and resolve. From the trenches of World War I to the beaches of Normandy, from the frozen hills of Korea to the scorching sands of North Africa and the Middle East. And we're doing a little Middle East work right now, too, if you might know. And we're doing very well. We have militarily defeated that particular opponent. And we're never going to let that opponent ever, Charles agrees with me, even more than I do, we're never going to let that opponent have a nuclear weapon. They know that, and they've known it right now very powerfully. But our countries have stood together.
And then he says, King Charles, you got the Democrats to clap for you earlier today. I can't do that. Here, play this clip.
And Queen Camilla of the United Kingdom to the White House. Very special place. Very, very special. And I also want to, before we really begin, I want to congratulate Charles on having made a fantastic speech today at Congress. He got the Democrats to stand. I've never been able to do that. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. They liked him more than they've ever liked any Republican or Democrat, actually. So I just want to thank you and congratulations. It's not an easy thing to do. That's a tough place.
Then Trump interrupts his speech to praise Rory McIlroy for winning golf tournaments. Here, play this clip.
This unstoppable daring, this unconquerable courage, it really is. It's unconquerable. And speaking of that, where's Rory McIlroy? Can stand up, Rory, will you please? That was unconquerable courage. That was very good, Rory. I don't know if that helps them talk about how wonderful the speech, but I had to interrupt my speech because I watched that man win a tournament. That was a tough one. Congratulations. Very proud of you.
But over and over and over again, when he gets caught, he goes bankrupt. And sadly, this is what he's done to the United States right now. You want to take a look at what's going on in Iran right now? Let me show you, bring in the B-roll, guys, of Tehran Square, where tens of thousands of people, potentially over 100,000 people every night now are out there basically partying and celebrating. They've got music. You want to see what it actually sounds like? Let's not even do the B-roll. Let me show you what Tehran Square looks like on every evening right now. Here, play this clip. And I'll show you another clip right here of just the music that they've got going. They are celebrating because in their mind, the United States has lost this war. Iran has destroyed the most powerful country in the most ever in the history of the world, has brought the United States down to its knees because Donald Trump is there frozen like a weak and pathetic ghoul where he doesn't know how to negotiate, and he's not going to further escalate because he saw what happens there. And that's where we're in no man's land, the Trump loop of chaos. That's where we are. I showed you the clip, right? So what else is Donald Trump doing right now as he's going ballistic at night, as the generals are leaking this information? Donald Trump, he goes to his safe spaces, attack Jimmy Kimmel, attack Rosie O'Donnell, force the Justice Department to indict James Comey for posting a social media thing a year ago with seashells. We're doing social media seashell indictments because Donald Trump's feelings were hurt. And now he's having the FCC go after ABC because Jimmy Kimmel told a joke. So just think about it. These MAGA people, these MAGA losers who were all like, we don't like big tech censorship. How dare Twitter ban somebody on their private platform for spreading lies about vaccines or supporting insurrections against democracy? How dare Twitter do that? Now the government filed another criminal indictment against James Comey, this one for posting seashell photographs that say 8647 on Instagram. When 86 means to get rid of, it's, as you know, it's restaurant slang or bar slang. It doesn't mean to harm somebody. It usually means get rid of him, get him out of here, right? It's a common term.
And buried in the middle of all that laughter was the king of a nation that has been watching this administration strain and batter every alliance it inherited, quietly ringing a bell and saying, "We are still here. Don't forget us. Don't forget what we built together." Charles had one more historical flourish for the evening. He referenced the Boston Tea Party, the 1773 act of colonial rebellion in which American colonists dumped British tea into Boston Harbor to protest taxation without representation, and wrapped it into his toast with the kind of wink that says, "We have been through worse than this, you and I." The message underneath the laughter was unmistakable. These two nations have survived disagreements before. They have survived wars, revolutions, political upheavals, and economic crises. The special relationship, Charles seemed to be saying through every joke, every reference, every carefully chosen historical allusion, is bigger than any one moment. It is bigger than any one administration. It has to be. The world needs it to be. Now let's talk about Trump's end of the evening, because it would be incomplete to ignore it. Trump spoke at the dinner, and there were, shall we say, moments. He began his toast by complimenting Charles on the Congress speech and noting, with what seemed like genuine bewilderment, that Democrats had stood to applaud. He then pivoted, as Trump almost always does, to the Middle East. He told the assembled dignitaries, the Supreme Court justices, the cabinet members, the Fox News hosts, the tech billionaires, that the United States had militarily defeated its opponent in the region and that Iran would never be allowed to have nuclear weapons. He then added, somewhat inexplicably, that Charles agrees with me even more than I do on that point, a sentence that may require several readings before it resolves into meaning. Trump also took a moment to acknowledge golfer Rory McIlroy, who was in attendance, interrupting his own remarks to point him out to the crowd. At a state dinner with the King of England, to point at a golfer. There is perhaps no more perfect encapsulation of the evening's dynamic than that single moment. Charles, precise and prepared and historically literate. Trump, loose and improvisational and pointing at Rory McIlroy. And we haven't even gotten to the most audacious part of the night. Multiple reports and video footage captured a moment during the receiving line when Trump appeared to move in front of Queen Camilla while shaking hands with guests, effectively cutting her off from the greeting. At a state dinner that he was hosting, in honor of the very queen he was cutting in front of. Diplomatic protocol, which exists for very good reasons, was once again left outside to wait in the cold. While all of this royal drama was unfolding at the White House, there was another story raging in the background, one that is just as important and considerably more alarming for what it tells us about the state of free speech and press freedom in this country. And it involves Jimmy Kimmel, Melania Trump, the FCC, and a joke that sent the entire media establishment into a tailspin. Here is what happened. On April 23rd, just days before the White House Correspondents' Dinner, Jimmy Kimmel aired a comedy sketch on his late-night show in which he delivered a mock address at the dinner. In the sketch, he looked at Melania Trump and said, and this was clearly meant as a joke about the age gap between the First Lady and her nearly 80-year-old husband, that she had a glow like an expectant widow. Now, that is a sharp joke. It is the kind of joke that has been made about powerful people in America since the very founding of this republic. Late-night comedy has always pushed at the edges of political power. It is one of the most American traditions there is. 3 days later, a heavily armed man attempted to enter the ballroom where the White House Correspondents' Dinner was being held. Trump was evacuated. The incident is now being investigated as a potential third assassination attempt on the president's life. What followed next was a cascade of events that should terrify anyone who believes in the First Amendment. Melania Trump took to social media and demanded that ABC fire Kimmel immediately, claiming his hateful and violent rhetoric was dividing the country. Trump backed her up, posting that Kimmel's comments were far beyond the pale and calling for Disney, which owns ABC, to terminate him. The FCC, whose chair Brendan Carr has been one of the administration's most aggressive media enforcers, responded by ordering Disney's 8 ABC-owned broadcast stations to file early license renewal applications, a process not scheduled to happen until 2028 at the earliest. This was not subtle. This was the federal government using its regulatory power over broadcast licenses as a weapon against a comedian who made a joke about the president's wife. Senator Elizabeth Warren put it plainly. The FCC has just pulled out a sword to hang over every single news organization in America and say, you report things that Donald Trump doesn't like, and your entire business model could disappear in the blink of an eye. Kimmel, to his enormous credit, did not back down. He addressed the controversy directly on his Monday night show, explaining that his remark was obviously a joke about their age difference and the look of joy we see on her face every time they're together. He said clearly and without apology that it was not by any stretch of the definition a call to assassination, and they know that.
All right, now I'll get back to my speech, Rory, okay?
Then Donald Trump says that British colonies or former British colonies don't know how good they had it, basically. Here, play this clip.
They have such love and such respect. Today, most of Britain's former colonies have no idea what they truly owe to this towering legacy of law, liberty, and British custom that they were given. We were given that, and it was a great, great gift.
So then Trump raises a toast at the UK state dinner, but he forgets to toast Melania. Let's play this clip right here. There were other very awkward moments as well, like before the speech was given, Donald Trump was outside the White House and Donald Trump was saying how jealous he was of King Charles. Here's what Trump said.
made a great speech. I was very jealous.
And then as the Queen was shaking people's hands, Donald Trump cuts in front of her. Like she's shaking the Trump's own cabinet members' hands, and Trump like pushes the Queen aside to like shake the hands of his cabinet members. And then the Queen stops shaking people's hands. She's like, did he just cut me off? Like, what are you doing? Why would Donald Trump need to shake the hands of his own cabinet members? Here, play this clip. And just a reminder for you about King Charles' speech earlier in the day at the joint session of Congress. Here he was saying that America's words carry weight and meaning, basically telling Donald Trump, stop using your words recklessly. Play this clip.
America's words carry weight and meaning, as they have since independence. The actions of this great nation matter even more.
Then he got a standing ovation when King Charles talked about how the United States Supreme Court has cited the Magna Carta multiple times. In fact, over 160 Supreme Court cases since 1789 on the issue regarding checks of executive power. Again, he's calling Donald Trump out for exceeding what Article 2 executive power should be about. Play this clip.
Roots go even further back in history. The U.S. Supreme Court Historical Society has calculated that Magna Carta is cited in at least 160 Supreme Court cases since 1789, not least as the foundation of the principle that executive power is subject to checks and balances.
And then King Charles invoked NATO. Remember this portion of his speech? Here, play this clip.
In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, when NATO invoked Article 5 for the first time, and the United Nations Security Council was united in the face of terror, we answered the call together, as our people have done so for more than a century, shoulder to shoulder, through 2 world wars, the Cold War, Afghanistan, and moments that have defined our shared security. Today, Mr. Speaker, that same unyielding resolve is needed for the defense of Ukraine and her most courageous people.
And then the Trump regime has escalated its conflict with ABC by ordering early license reviews for the network's TV stations, a rare move led by FCC Chairman Brendan Carr. The action comes as Donald Trump pressures ABC to fire Jimmy Kimmel over controversial jokes. Controversial jokes. These MAGAs are the biggest. Oh my God, the jokes are so controversial, Donald. And he goes on to say, the FCC says the review relates to an investigation into Disney's diversity programs, but critics argue it's retaliation for airing Kimmel's show. These guys are just so utterly pathetic right now. No wonder Donald Trump's poll numbers are absolutely crashing. I'll do a whole other video on this, but the latest Reuters Ipsos poll has Donald Trump's approval at 34%. Donald Trump's approval on the cost of living, 22%. His overall approval, 34%. His approval on cost of living, 22%. But folks, you know, Donald Trump, dude's focused on all of the important things right now. Putting his face on new U.S. passports. Yeah, what Donald Trump's focused on right now is new U.S. passports that are made. Donald Trump and the State Department would like to have Trump's face on all of your passports. Already, Donald Trump's face is all over the national park pass right now. It's a big photo of him and George Washington. So if you get your national park pass, you have to get this ridiculous photo. Coming soon, potentially, to your passport. When you just want to get a passport, it's going to have Donald Trump's face on it. Golden ballrooms, triumphal arches. He puts his photo all over buildings in DC. And yes, the Trump regime right now is focused on an April 30 deadline to Zambia. The Trump regime is playing hardball with Zambia. Hey, Zambia, give us access to your rare earth minerals or else. Or else what? If we don't give you our rare earth minerals and your mining terms, what are you going to do, Trump regime? You will lose HIV medication. We will make sure that you all spread HIV and AIDS if you don't give us a mining deal. What? 1.3 million Zambians rely on HIV treatment funded through PEPFAR, important program. So you're saying that if we don't give you our copper, lithium, and cobalt reserves, you're going to not help the 1.3 million Zambians who rely on this HIV treatment that the prior program was helping? Yes, that's what we're going to do at America. I mean, what a sick regime. What a despicable group of people, right? The worst. Trash. Humans. Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million.
This is not the first time Kimmel has found himself in this crossfire. Last September, after Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk was assassinated, Kimmel made remarks about the MAGA response to the killing that drew a firestorm. The FCC threatened ABC affiliates. Disney briefly suspended his show. Broadcast station owners pulled his programming. Kimmel apologized and came back. And here we are again, less than a year later, with the same machinery being deployed against the same man for the same reason. He refuses to stop telling the truth about power. The White House communications director added a statement calling on Kimmel to be shunned for defending the joke rather than apologizing. Shunned. That is the language of the administration now when it comes to journalists, comedians, and critics. Not rebuttal. Not debate. Not the free exchange of ideas. Shunned. This is what authoritarianism looks like when it is wearing a suit and tie and sending press releases. It does not always arrive with tanks. Sometimes it arrives with FCC license reviews and social media posts from the First Lady. The outcome is the same. And then, as if to make absolutely certain that no one could mistake the direction this administration is moving, the Justice Department dropped a bombshell that broke through even the glamour of the royal state dinner. Former FBI Director James Comey, the man Trump fired in 2017 while Comey's bureau was actively investigating Russian interference in the 2016 election, the man who has become one of the most prominent critics of this administration, was indicted. Again. For the second time. For a photograph of seashells. This requires some explanation because it is genuinely one of the most remarkable prosecutorial actions in the modern history of American law. In 2025, Comey posted a photo on Instagram of seashells he had found on a beach in North Carolina. The shells were arranged to spell out the numbers 8647. In slang, 86 means to get rid of something or someone. The number 47 refers to Trump, who is the 47th president of the United States. Republicans and Trump allies immediately claimed this was a violent threat against the president. Comey said he thought it was a clever way to express a political viewpoint and that he had not known of a violent meaning behind 86. The photo was deleted. The matter seemed settled. And then the Trump DOJ came knocking. The first attempt to prosecute Comey came last September when a grand jury in Virginia indicted him on charges of lying to Congress and obstructing justice related to media leaks during his tenure at the FBI. That case was thrown out by a federal judge who ruled that the Trump-appointed interim prosecutor who brought the charges had been improperly installed, having bypassed Senate confirmation entirely. Comey had predicted at the time that Trump would come for him again. He was right. On April 28, 2026, the very same day King Charles was dining at the White House, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, the man who once served as Trump's personal criminal defense attorney, stood at a podium and announced that a grand jury in North Carolina had indicted James Comey on 2 counts, making threats against the President of the United States and transmitting a threat in interstate commerce. Both charges carry a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. A warrant was issued for Comey's arrest. Comey responded within hours in a video posted to his Substack account. He looked directly into the camera and said, "I'm still innocent. I'm still not afraid. And I still believe in the independent federal judiciary. So let's go. It was a defiant, measured, deeply personal statement from a man who has now been indicted twice by the administration of the person he refuses to stop criticizing. His attorney Patrick Fitzgerald, yes, the same Patrick Fitzgerald who prosecuted Scooter Libby, called the charges baseless and promised to vindicate Comey and the First Amendment in court. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer called it a perverse abuse of the justice system. Senator Chris Van Hollen called the DOJ the president's personal attack dog. Naldi Munsinder Dieder, Debris Naldi Beers. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri took to social media to suggest the DOJ should indict Comey for other things while they're at it. Because for some members of Congress, this is not alarming. This is not a constitutional crisis. This is a wish list. Let's put this in the full context it deserves. In the span of a single administration, the Trump DOJ has indicted Comey twice. It has indicted New York Attorney General Letitia James on bank fraud charges that were later dropped. It has investigated Adam Schiff for mortgage fraud, reportedly finding insufficient evidence to charge him. It has fired prosecutors who worked on cases involving abortion protesters. It has subpoenaed the bodyguards of the Fulton County District Attorney who prosecuted Trump over his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And it is now using seashell arrangements on a beach as the basis for federal criminal charges carrying a decade in prison. The pattern is not subtle. The targets are not random. They are, with extraordinary consistency, people who have investigated Trump, prosecuted Trump, criticized Trump, or refused to bend to Trump. The Department of Justice has become, in the words of Senator Van Hollen, an attack dog. And the leash is held by a man who was until recently the sitting president's personal defense attorney. Comey himself has noted that the timing of this second indictment, 3 days after the Correspondents' Dinner shooting, at a moment when the administration has been working to connect violent rhetoric to its political opponents, is not coincidental. The administration has made public statements suggesting that critics and comedians and former officials are responsible for the atmosphere that produces violence against the president. And now, one of those critics is facing federal charges and an arrest warrant. This is the United States of America in the spring of 2026. A monarch from our oldest ally is visiting to quietly remind us of the value of checks and balances. A late-night host is facing FCC retaliation for a joke. And a former director of the FBI is being hunted by federal prosecutors over a photograph of shells on a beach. Here at USA Press, we want to make sure you understand what all of these stories have in common because they are not unrelated. King Charles did not come to Washington to exchange pleasantries and accept gifts. He came, in the most diplomatic way possible, to hold up a mirror. He came to remind this country, and the world watching, that the values upon which the United States was built, the checks and balances, the rule of law, the independence of the judiciary, the defense of democratic allies, the protection of free expression, are not partisan positions. They are the architecture of civilization itself. He cited the Magna Carta. He cited Article 5. He cited Ukraine. He cited the importance of a vibrant, diverse, and free society. He did not mention Trump by name, not once. He did not have to. Everyone in that chamber knew exactly what was being said. And while Charles was delivering his perfectly calibrated diplomatic sermon, the administration was simultaneously demonstrating, in real time, every single thing he was warning about. The FCC was moving to threaten a broadcaster's license over a joke. The DOJ was indicting a man over a beach photograph. The president was greeting a foreign monarch while apparently cutting in line past the queen. And in the East Room, amid the garden vegetable velouté and the spring-herbed ravioli and the Dover sole, the man who had spent months destabilizing the international order was laughing at jokes about burning his house down in 1814, apparently delighted, apparently oblivious, apparently having the time of his life. There is a word for what King Charles did in Washington on April 28, 2026. It is not roasting, though that is how it will be described on social media. It is not slamming, though that is the word the headlines will reach for. The word is diplomacy, real diplomacy, the kind that has almost vanished from the modern world, the kind that speaks truth through history and humor, that plants seeds of conscience in rooms where conscience has become a luxury. Charles sat across from the most powerful man on the planet, looked him in the eyes, made him laugh, made him applaud, and told him, in terms any historian could decode, that the British burned this house before, and they remember what it cost everyone. That nations do not survive by burning things down. That the architecture of freedom, the checks, the balances, the alliances, the rule of law, is not a constraint on greatness. It is the condition of it. King Charles rang his bell, and anyone who was listening could hear every note. This is USA Press. We tell the stories that matter, and we need your help to keep telling them. If this video gave you something to think about, please like it right now. It takes 1 second, and it sends this story to thousands of people who need to hear it. Subscribe to USA Press if you haven't already, because we are here every single day doing this work, and we are just getting started. Drop a comment below and tell us what you thought of King Charles's visit. Do you think he got through to this administration? Do you think it mattered? Because we believe it did. We believe the words spoken in that chamber, and the jokes cracked in that dining room, and the bell rung at that table are going to echo a great deal longer than anyone in that room might expect. History has a way of doing that. USA Press. Stay informed. Stay engaged. Stay fearless.